And honestly, before we get started, hi all. But Debbie and I are just back. I'm still tired, because we were at the Empowered Women's Retreat last weekend, and I'm going to get emotional again. It was so amazing to see the healing that those women, they showed up for themselves and they showed up for each other. So, but Debbie is part of the team that has been working on those in-person retreats, and you may have a little bit of feedback before you hit the webinar as well, but it was really meaningful to the women, but for me to witness what, like, it just is, it's good stuff. We're going to offer it again probably the end of September. We don't have all the details, but we'll post it when we do. But any input or feedback that you have on that before we get going too would be welcome.
Yeah. Well, I just want to just second what you said, and the Empowered Women Intensive was incredible. We do see such a huge shift and change in the participants, and so it's an honor as a therapist to be part of the facilitation of that process. And I know we as facilitators talked about the letdown that comes from being there and helping people transform and empower themselves. And I have to say, when I came home, I even missed it. So it's just such an incredible experience. So those of you that are out there wanting to do some really wonderful deep work in a short amount of time and really leave empowered, I just cannot stress enough just how wonderful the intensive was. And I'm going to take some of my content actually, and it's going to be from that as well. So first of all, I want to welcome everybody to the third Friday of the month, our interactive webinar, which means we do need you to ask questions. Feel free to ask questions on the topic I'm presenting today, or even any other questions that you might have and you need some direction and maybe support with. So I'm going to do a part two. Last time we got together, the first week of the month, we talked about rebuilding and reestablishing trust. So I talked a little bit about Brene Brown's Braving acronym and how it kind of gives us some really practical guidelines on how to look for if somebody is trustworthy. Today, I'm going to talk about some steps, some specific things that can be done together as a couple in reestablishing and rebuilding trust. The reason that I'm taking this approach and kind of took my webinar today really is based on, it seemed like building trust was a big theme at the Women's Intensive. And it all started with the boundaries workshop that we did. And then how do you set boundaries around rebuilding trust? Because it's so huge and it's so vast. And we had participants there that said, hey, I have no boundaries. I don't even know what to do. Some were saying, how can you ever even rebuild trust? How do you even know? And, can I even really ever trust him again? So I'm hoping today that as we talk about some things, that'll give you some guidelines, things to do, not only as an addict partner, but as a betrayed partner and together as a couple. So I just want to circle back around a couple of things. I want the addict partner and the betrayed partner to understand just some really important points. Number one, and that is that rebuilding trust is a very slow process. There is no timeline. Oftentimes, we want to know it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. It all depends on the circumstances. It depends on so many factors that I wish I could give you an exact timeline, but we can't. So, really, rebuilding this trust requires patience. Like I said, it requires time. And remember, we've got a betrayed partner who's got to integrate their new truth. All of a sudden, I've had all this disclosure, discovery, excuse me, and now I'm having to somehow make it make sense with my reality, what I thought it was and what it actually is. The betrayed partner has to kind of rewrite the narrative of their life. And part of that narrative includes, how do I move forward? How can I get to a place of trust? But it requires that both partners take a very active role. I oftentimes see betrayed partners wanting to rebuild trust, and there's resistance from the addict partner. And in an ideal world, and I'm going to talk today about ideally, this is how it takes place. So rather than get discouraged, I want to also emphasize that we can start with one simple thing at a time and build on it. Not all of these things are going to happen all at once. So one of the first places that you need to start is really recognizing, what does trust really mean to me? I have to have a lot of clarity because it means different things to both the addict partner and the betrayed partner. So, trust could be that there's a commitment to the relationship and to the partner. That might be part of trust for you. Trust might mean I feel safe with my partner. I know that they respect me and my boundaries, my physical boundaries, my emotional boundaries, my sexual boundaries. Trust might be that my partner listens to me and communicates with me, and they try to understand where I'm coming from. They have empathy. Trust could possibly mean that we don't hide things, that we know everything. We show up honestly and authentically. Trust could also mean that it's very supportive. It's a process that we work on together as our goal is healing and recovery. So, what does that process look like? So, one of the important things you need to do as an addict partner and a betrayed partner is to sit down and ask yourself, what does trust mean to me? And I love the questions that I present again and again and again around, okay, if there was trust in this relationship, if I could trust my partner, what would it look like? It has to be very, very specific. What would I be experiencing if this need was met? So, what would I see happening? I want it to be very, very detailed. Would it be my partner would be going to their therapist regularly, every 2 to 3 weeks? Then it would help me know that I could trust them because I'm seeing them do it over and over again. Would it be that when I approach my betrayed partner, that they are at a place where they can stay regulated, right? So then I can go to them openly and honestly, right? And be able to share because I know we're not going to go down the rabbit hole of disconnection. So we have to really understand specifically, here's what trust looks like for me. And then we have to talk about, what are the options? How do I get this trust need met? Obviously, we've got to verbalize it. So that's an option. I've got to communicate it. Another option might be, if I'm having a difficult time communicating it, maybe we need to go into, say, our couples therapist and communicate it and talk it through there. So we don't go down that rabbit hole of disconnection. So, what are the things that were in my control in getting this need met? We've got to understand that. Part of that, too, is setting a boundary. And as I often say, boundaries are around safety. It's not about control, and it's not about punishment. It's about, I want my partner to be safe. And here's how I know you're safe and I can trust you and move towards you. So sometimes we need to ask ourselves, do I need support and guidance in this? So we don't often know what we don't know. That's the interesting thing. A lot of us have never learned how to really understand what boundaries we can put into place around trust. So we need to go to somebody who can help guide us on that. So let's talk about 16 steps today that are going to help rebuild trust. The first step is, you've got to make the commitment to repair the trust. There has to be commitment from both partners, 100%. That has to be so important that you're willing to do the work. Both partners have to have an attitude of willingness, that they are going to work on doing whatever it takes to rebuild the trust. So we have to have kind of an open, willing attitude about the fact that trust needs to be rebuilt. Resistance has to go away, and that resistance piece is really hard. I often see betrayed partners who they are so willing to start rebuilding trust, but they have an addict partner who isn't. And oftentimes they're farther ahead in their recovery, as I say, because they're connected to prefrontal cortex, right? They're working out of that more advanced, part of their brain, that executive functioning part of their brain, where if those are in early days of recovery, they're just really trying to get into sobriety and putting together all the recovery skills and tools that they've got to integrate on a daily basis. So I often see that addict partners and betrayed partners are in different places, but we can both commit to it. We may not know how we're going to do it, but we can commit to it and have this attitude that I'm going to take the steps necessary to rebuild the relationship, to repair the connection. And it has to be a together process. The second step is that you have to take accountability. It's really important that the addict partner acknowledges how their actions have hurt the betrayed partner. So they express remorse. about the deception and the betrayal. They have to be very specific about this action I did. I can see where it hurt you and impacted you this way. It's admitting fault, right? I did something wrong. I made a mistake, and this mistake hurt you, and they have to have remorse. That is so key for a betrayed partner in feeling like they can begin to trust their addict partner. They also need to see that there is this consistency along with the accountability. And that's where then the betrayed partner can finally get to that place where I can start to let my guard down and to begin to trust. So that accountability piece for the addict partner is so important in the very beginning. We talked often about how the formal therapeutic disclosure is part of that. And oftentimes I see betrayed partners who can't start to rebuild trust until they know everything because their brain is trying to put together all the pieces of the puzzle. And so part of the addict partner's process in their recovery is I've got to be fully accountable. And a formal therapeutic disclosure done with the guidance of qualified therapists is such a wonderful way to begin that trust journey. Another thing that an addict partner can do is they can even put together and write an accountability statement, one that they give to their betrayed partner. So it's a way to communicate their intentions to repair and build their trust and to take responsibility for their actions. And then the betrayed partner can go back to that accountability statement and read the addict partner's intentions around their accountability. So it can be a very grounding tool, especially when a betrayed partner gets dysregulated and they get activated. We have to understand that accountability, it will deepen and it will expand over time because accountability can cover so many different areas, not just in the area of, hey, recovery and you making restitution and being accountable for your addiction, but it's going to be in so many other aspects of your life as well. And remember, accountability is a two-way street. So just like we expect the addict partner to be accountable and do their work, so does the betrayed partner have to do their work as well. So both people are accountable to each other in rebuilding this trust. Step 3 is you have to commit to being 100% honest. So the addict partner cannot repair trust. The betrayed partner cannot heal unless there's full truth. And again, it's a two-way street because I work with betrayed partners that sometimes come in and they don't tell the full truth on how they're feeling. They might hold back and not share. So we've got to get to a point where both are accountable to honesty. And so that means I'm going to push through my shame and my guilt, and I am going to push through the fear, the defensiveness, and I'm going to be completely honest. I'm going to tell you what I'm really feeling rather than denying, and saying, no, I'm just okay. When in reality, maybe I'm in my fear as a betrayed partner. Or maybe I'm struggling as an addict partner, but I'm telling my betrayed partner, I'm doing well, I'm fine. We have to show up honestly. We have to admit that we're human at times and that we struggle, but we need to be honest about it. We cannot expect to repair trust and rebuild trust if we're not willing to really show up as ourselves in the full truth. That is so imperative. Okay, step 4. You need to create a trust plan together. So this needs to be very, very intentional. This is really important that we put together a joint plan. It's really key in the restoration of trust. So you're going to use the questions like I discussed earlier, right? What would this repair plan look like? How can we rebuild trust? What's a plan going to look like? What would I experience? What would I see happening? You want to clearly outline the expectations that you have. So you've got to decide together on what actions will rebuild trust and demonstrate commitment to the relationship's future. So remember, this plan is about healing us. It's not about healing just me. Yes, that's part of it. But I have seen sometimes couples struggle when one partner is wanting to focus on how do we rebuild trust between us and the other person's only focused on their own healing. It has to go together. It's an integrative process. So we can do both at the same time, but we can't do it unless we have spoken about, communicated, identified, and written down the specific steps we're going to take. So a plan could include things like how often we're going to go see our therapists, how often will we attend support meetings. We're going to talk about creating and holding agreements in just a moment. So part of the plan is going to include these specific agreements that we've sat down, discussed, and written down, and that we're holding to. It's going to identify how we communicate with each other and we're heard. So it's going to be specific communication skills and tools that we use. It may include a therapeutic disclosure. So that might be part of the plan. And we identify maybe a date in the future that allows for enough time for preparation, but it doesn't delay the process so that we can start to rebuild the trust. It will also include empathy building. Again, this is a higher level skill set. So empathy building might be something that we work on and maybe do exercises around. Or we maybe even as we do a check-in, we're going to talk about in a minute, we just talk about empathy and what that looks like for me. Here's what I'd hear you say. So we share that back and forth. Sometimes we have to go in and we have to have a couples therapist help us with the empathy building, and we actually practice it in session. So put that in the plan. Maybe in the future, here's how we're going to focus on the empathy building. And then, like I said, maybe include couples counseling as part of that. I think that's very imperative that once you get to a certain point and you're in your recovery, you're regulated, you've done the formal therapeutic disclosure, then it's a really good idea to start integrating the couples therapy in that as well. So we can continue working on the repair. Step 5 is we've got to create agreements and honor them. This is another word for this is boundaries. I'm going to put together some specific boundaries, a specific framework and format. Making and keeping these agreements is one of the most effective trust building behaviors. And so it's really important that we know what we're doing. So the addict partner needs to be clear about their intentions, and they do that by engaging in specific agreements and having boundaries with the betrayed partner. This then provides the betrayed partner with his predictability. So I know what to expect. And then I feel a sense of control when I know what to expect because we've agreed on these non-negotiable things that we're going to do together. So then it's really important that we follow through. So this involves really setting healthy boundaries from daily check-ins to how we're going to limit any things from escalating to the point where it's going to create further disconnection in the relationship. So we think of agreements and these boundaries as behaviors that the addict partner commits to stop doing and behaviors the couple agree to start doing, whether it's individually or together. So some examples of that, you can use the 3 circles boundary exercise. And as a couple, you sit down and you go, okay, let's look at our inner circle behaviors. These are the bottom line behaviors. What are we saying we're not going to do, right? These are the things that we will not do because if we do them, it's going to break all trust. Then we're going to have the middle circle behaviors. Those are the behaviors that you go into, and sometimes that's the yellow circle we refer to it. Center circle's red, middle circle's yellow. These are the behaviors that lead me to believe I can't trust you. So it might be missing sessions with your therapist. It might be having a temper. It could be doing more safety seeking as a betrayed partner. So look at those things that I call the slippery slope behaviors that if I continue to do it, it's going to continue further to disrupt and break trust. It could even lead you into the center circle. And then the outer circle is going to be the things that you identify as a couple that you will be doing that will rebuild the trust. Another really important agreement is a fair fighting agreement. And to put together the agreement you have that when you do get disconnected, when you're limbic, here is what we're going to do. You know, we're going to decide to do that at a certain time in a certain place. We're going to put boundaries around the shame-based language we use. We're going to put a boundary around taking a time out if things escalate. So we know what to expect when we're having a disagreement, when there's disconnection. And then that way we have to follow through on that, because then I show up in that moment, I follow that contract, and then our chances of staying connected, even in a difficult conversation, increases. You need to have a step and put in place for reporting slips. What's that going to look like? Right? What is the agreement around that? Is it 12 hours, 24 hours that you report a slip? Exactly. What is a slip, right? What needs to be reported? That needs to be negotiated and talked about. And then what's going to happen if a slip isn't reported in 12 to 24 hours, right? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take some time away from the relationship, create safety for myself, do self-care, possibly ask you to sleep in another room, or I'll go sleep in a different place in the house until I feel like it's safe to kind of return back into the same room with you and sleep in the same bed. We need to talk about communication rules. Again, when we get escalated, do we take a time out? Person who calls the timeout has to come back within 24 hours to reinitiate the conversation and to complete it. Are we going to do check-ins? What does a check-in look like? And we'll talk a little bit more about check-ins in just a moment. So it's really important that we have agreements put into place so we know what it is, the expectation is, and what needs to be honored. Step 6, you have to create an environment of proactive transparency. So proactive transparency is basically full access to information, which means that we have to make boundaries about being completely transparent. So again, what would this proactive transparency look like? If I knew as a betrayed partner, I could go to my addict partner at any time and ask for information and get it, what would that look like? What would I hear them say, see them do? Ask yourselves those questions. We want to have areas, very specific areas of transparency, whether it's where you're at and where you're going and when you'll be home, to the finances, to what's on your phone, to what's in the our email accounts. I mean, think about what that transparency is. It could even include when I come to you with a question that you answer it without defensiveness, that you just provide the information. So transparency keeps everything out in the open. It facilitates trust, so it stops the overthinking in the betrayed partner. If I can't get the information from my addict partner, then my mind is going to go crazy. I'm going to have so many stories in my head, so I'm constantly ruminating about trying to get the answers, trying to get the full truth. But if I've got an addict partner who's so willing to show up and just be an open book, it really calms things down and helps the couple connect because both of them will be more grounded. What it also does is it starts to highlight more of the repair of the trust if I've got this proactive transparency rather than getting into conflict about what's not being shared. And so then we're focusing on the problems rather on rebuilding the trust. So talking about transparency is very, very important. Step 7 is refining and improving your communication. So we have to have open and honest and transparent communication. So we want to engage in dialogue that is productive, where you can express your feelings and your concerns without being shut down, gaslit, either or becoming defensive. And so we need to use reflective listening skills and tools. We have to both commit to that we're going to listen without interrupting. We've got to commit to asking permission before you respond. And when you do respond, you reflect back what you heard. I'm going to say back to you what I thought I heard you say. I interpreted, but it's really just factual, not the interpretation. But I heard you say this, this, and check in with your partner to see if you heard it correctly. And then using that I language, rather than you did this and you did this, it's, I feel this when I see this and I hear this. Here's what I need. When we can do that, then we stay connected. We also want to ask open-ended questions rather than yes and no questions. That facilitates communicating and discussing things. And we have to learn how to discuss grievances. Like when there is disconnection, how can I come to you? That's where the fair fighting agreement comes into place. So one of your rules in your fair fighting agreement might be that we use reflective listening, or I use I statements. We both agree to use I statements. So we have to learn through communication skills and tools how to stay grounded. When we can do that, then it allows both the addict partner and the betrayed partner to withstand the tension that's going to come up when there's that disconnection. So we have to communicate about our communication. It's just that simple. Okay, step 8, set a time to talk about the betrayal. So in the early days, the betrayed partner may have a need to discuss the betrayal, but I want you to consider putting a container around it. What that means is maybe daily there's an opportunity to do a check-in, 15 minutes, where the betrayed partner can talk about the betrayal. And then we stop at that point, knowing that the next day or 2 or 3 days later, whatever the agreement is, we're going to talk about it again. Because this is going to help you step out of having it be a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week discussion. So this concept of putting a container around it is we're going to allow it for this much time, then we'll come back around again consistently. So each partner can prepare for having a productive discussion each time you come together. And then the betrayed partner feels like they're in control of getting information they need. They're not feeling a deficit. And then the addict partner is showing up being very open and honest. So that requires that the addict partner has to come and answer questions without defensiveness, without minimizing, not requiring that a question be worded in the exact way, that you just provide the information with that transparency that we talked about. And then you can evaluate weekly as to whether or not you really need to keep doing these meetings. Maybe instead of daily, it goes to once or twice a week. Then maybe it's once a week, and then maybe it's not at all, because we're at that point where, right, we're well into our recovery. We don't have that need for that information. But as we're coming together and talking about that and asking questions and giving answers, I want you to consider, and this is step 9 and 10. So step 9 is really, as a betrayed partner, evaluate your questions. We want them to be constructive questions. So you've got to think about those questions as, will this question help me rebuild and reestablish trust? So you've got to be very thoughtful about it. My recommendation is that you write them down before you even come to that check-in, so that you can be very clear on, here's what I need to know, and you have those prompts right in front of you. You have to ask yourself, how is this going to help me understand what happened and why it happened? So some questions to ask yourself, it would be, is the answer something I really need to know? Is the answer something that will help me in my healing recovery? Is this question something that won't be helpful? Is it going to just further fuel intrusive thoughts, cause me to have a trigger? So that requires that you have to be grounded and know, is this the best question for me to ask? And then step 10, the addict partner needs to evaluate their answers. They have to be open, honest, transparent, and provide the answers truthfully. But you also have to do it in a way that helps the betrayed partner not go into a trauma trigger or become overly distressed. So you need to take into consideration, is there a formal therapeutic disclosure in the horizon? Because if there is, that's another way to put a container around it. I can answer this question just simply, here's the facts, and I will give you more details when we go to formal therapeutic disclosure. So sometimes we get into the tiny little details that oftentimes will bring back disturbing images for the betrayed partner. So there is a really fine balance. So if you're unsure of what your betrayed partner is asking, then get curious. Ask them, okay, what is it that you specifically need to know? I'm willing to provide that for you. And why is it important for you to know this? Tell me how it's going to help you, because that's an important piece of it. And then as an addict partner, you've got to answer the questions truthfully. You have to commit to doing that, because otherwise, I know betrayed partners, they can sense if you're not telling the full truth. They have that intuitive sense. And so that's when you might see them coming back again and again and again. But again, take into consideration where you're at in that process of having a formal therapeutic disclosure. Put boundaries around it if you can. And then after the formal therapeutic disclosure, know that there's going to be questions still, and there's going to be answers that need to be provided. And so you might want to put a container around that too, and work on that in a couples session, or do that at a weekly check-in, rather than just having it all the time. So think about that. Step 11, set a time for a non-negotiable weekly, either a relationship check-in or recovery check-in. So this means that at least once weekly, the addict partner is going to take the initiative and be responsible for instigating the agreed upon time, place where you're going to do your check-in. So I love John Gottman's check-in for couples. I think that helps you attune to one another. And so that's really talking about the relationship. And in that check-in, we talk about appreciations for each other. We talk about what went right in the relationship. We talk about some of the points that I call them the sticking points, things that didn't go well. We talk about what you need in the next week. And that way we can create connection that way. A recovery check-in is going to be more about checking in with each other regarding the progress you're making in your recovery work. So with that, you might be sharing feelings and emotions around different areas of your life: physical, emotional, spiritual, relational. It might be, here's the recovery work I'm doing. Here's the struggles I'm having. Here's what I'm learning. Here's my goal for the next week that I'm committing to. So that is a recovery check-in. That helps rebuild trust for the betrayed partner, because then they get a sense of what their addict partner's working on and they feel included, and it's very connecting. We don't want to do a recovery check-in where we're fighting about it. We want to make sure that when I come to that meeting, I'm there not only to share what I'm doing, but to help my partner understand I am doing this to help rebuild the connection between us. That's very, very important. So when we come together, again, like I said, you've got to be honest. You've got to communicate about the things that are important to you, but you can also come and talk about topics if you want. So maybe we're going to do a check-in and just talk about appreciation. And let's just talk about what we do appreciate, what is going right now in the relationship. Maybe we get together and we talk about the things that did or did not go well this week. And can we problem solve right now on how to maybe do it differently? Can we learn from the mistake and rework the boundary or figure out a new rule as to how to handle it? Maybe we need to talk about logistics, just general things, but we come together and do a check-in to create connection. It's such a wonderful trust-building activity. It goes a long way because it displays the readiness of the addict partner to be accountable. And as they follow through and as they kind of come to the betrayed partner saying, hey, it's time for check-in, it rebuilds so much trust. Okay, step 12. This is an interesting one. Don't gossip or trash talk about your partner to others. We talked about common enemy intimacy last time. Brene Brown's concept of going to somebody else and talking about a third party in a negative way and creating a false sense of connection. So as a betrayed partner, it's very easy for me to go to all of my girlfriends and talk trash about my addict partner because they really truly have hurt me. However, if the goal is to rebuild trust, we have to be very careful about who we turn to and what we talk about. I know even at the groups I do, at the recent intensive we did with women, we don't spend time talking and trash talking about the addict partners, right? As an addict partner, you shouldn't go into a group meeting and trash talk the betrayed partner. What we go in with is we talk about, here's issues I'm dealing with. That's okay. But we have to be very careful because it's so tempting to vent, especially when we're dysregulated, right? We're so activated that we want to go to somebody and vent. We have to be very careful because if I'm talking negatively about my partner to somebody else, it's very difficult to build any kind of trust, especially when it comes back to the other person. So choose who you talk to and how you talk about your partner and do it wisely. Okay. Step 13, create a culture of appreciation. I want you to learn to focus on what is going right rather than always on what's going wrong and all the bad stuff. As human beings, we do so much better when we get positive reinforcement. So when things are going right, it's wonderful to acknowledge it. Remember, this is about creating connection. It's not about who's right or wrong, who's doing more work and less work. It's about creating connection. It's that generosity piece we talked about last week in the Braving acronym. I am going to give my partner the benefit of the doubt that what they're doing because they're doing it well-intentioned, right? And so I come at this in this place of generosity. I'm going to appreciate what you are doing. So actively talk about your commitments and talk about how much you appreciate the work the other person's doing. Step 14, begin reconnecting on a deeper level. So what by this I mean step out of all the recovery talk that you do. Sometimes we just need to spend quality time together and partake in activities that foster closeness and understanding. Maybe it's fun activities, maybe it's physical activities. I mean, there's so many different forms of intimacy, whether it's educational, it could be recreational, it could be spiritual. There's so many other things that we can do to start connecting on other areas and on deeper levels. It might mean that we spend quality time together. It might mean that we go into couples therapy, but we're going to be very intentional in reconnecting emotionally. Now, again, this is further down the line. This is not the early days of rebuilding trust, but at some point, we have to go a little deeper where we're connecting not just on recovery stuff, but also in the relationship on a deeper level. So that leads us into step 15, which is making sure that you seek professional help. Because so often couples are so overwhelmed, they don't know where to begin. So that's where a couples counselor can be very instrumental. A couples counselor is looking for patterns. They're looking for the sticking points. They're there to guide you. You can ask questions. You can get answers. They can guide you through a plan of action. They can help you create structure around things, give you ideas for rebuilding that deeper level of intimacy. They can help you in the moment when you're having disconnection and teach you the skills and tools for repairing that. Again, I'm going to go back to we don't know what we don't know. So we can't do it differently until we learn and get the data and the information for doing it differently. And then the last step, step number 16, is continue to plan, and revise as needed. Things are going to come up. Things will go smoothly. They won't go smoothly. Continue to work together to build this plan because there's going to be some breaches in trust at times. So we might have to talk that through, figure out how to do it differently. My recommendation is that at least every 2 months, you're sitting down and looking at your plan and what you're doing, because I want you to think of this. This is kind of a living, breathing document, meaning it's going to change over time. So we've got to talk about what areas are not working. How can we do it differently? We can add plans. Like I said, you might want to start very small in your plan for rebuilding trust and then add to it. But you need to be very open as you come together and as you're revising your plan on problem solving and identifying new ways to do it. But it's really important that you check in often to see how the trust building is going. We have to both be able to give input and revise things. We can't be super rigid at times. Sometimes there are things that are black and white, it's true, but there are a lot of areas of gray. So sometimes we have to go in and redefine some of those gray areas. So it's important that we continue to focus on this plan. So in conclusion, if anybody wants this list, feel free to reach out. I think the most important thing is to start with being intentional. Decide you're going to do a plan. If you're in a place where your partner is willing to work with you, approach them with this. It would be wonderful if you're an addict partner listening to this webinar that you approach the betrayed partner. I think that would be a really wonderful first step. But again, you have to be very specific in what it is you need for trust. Get that clarity. So when it's time to talk about it, when it's time to put boundaries in place, you have a very clear understanding of what you need in order to reconnect and reconnect in a healthier way. So that's the steps that can help you in rebuilding trust and reestablishing the trust in a relationship where there's been betrayal.
Great content as always. I've got some questions for you. Like when you're talking about uh, trust, building trust and all that. I know some partners struggle with trusting too early. Like,
Mhm.
so I think it's challenging to go, okay, how do we identify that, we can trust, and understanding that it's, maybe baby steps, I just was talking to somebody this week and they were like, it's been a hot minute since there's been discovery and we're doing great. And I was like, whoa, like we're building and all of this. And I mean, it's literally been a very short time. And so I was feeling like there's trust given that isn't warranted. And so, like as we're building this, how do we navigate and understand, like, okay, trust this much? Any parameter information, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think that again, we have to kind of build trust, right? It's layer upon layer upon layer. And I often find that one of the challenges that betrayed partners have is sometimes they minimize, right? The depth of the broken trust, right? And they see one little thing that the addict partner is doing, and it's like, oh my gosh, things are all better, right? I'm going to jump in with both feet. And so sometimes you have to work on that in your own individual therapy and with your therapist. Help me understand what trust looks like, especially if you've had a history throughout your life of people breaking trust, right? And you don't even understand what trust looks like. So really turn to somebody who can help educate you on trust and what all that involves, because there's so many different layers to it. I like the idea of maybe focusing on one area. Can I trust my partner to show up weekly and do a check-in, right? And then I give myself permission when I see it consistently over time, right? All of a sudden I can determine internally, okay, I can trust them to do this. They're doing this. They're going to their therapist all the time. So that's a layer I add. Maybe the next one is, I can trust that they're going to stay regulated. And so I know I can talk to them about hard things and they stay regulated. So again, I'm rebuilding trust in that area. So I'm taking it one step at a time. They're going to do formal therapeutic disclosure with me. Okay, well, it's really hard, right? Once I get through that and I process all that comes afterwards, and there's accountability because I'm sharing my impact letter with my partner, they're taking accountability. Again, I add another layer or level of trust. So you have to look at trust in that way, that it's not just an all or nothing, that they're doing a few little things and I can trust them again. It's almost that I'm going to sit back and I'm going to be that compassionate observer that I talk about, that stance where I'm just going to notice what's happening without judging. I'm going to look for the patterns, the behavior I'm seeing. Do they indicate trust? But again, I have to know, as that betrayed partner, what are the elements of trust? What is it that I need? Am I seeing my partner willingly do that? And it takes time. Like I said at the very beginning, if you think in 3 months you can trust them completely, that's too soon, right? If, let's say, 2 years down the road, let's say your addict partner doing everything, and 2 years you're still not trusting them, then we got to look at that a little deeper and say, okay, is there something underneath that for you as a betrayed partner? Is there some trauma around that precedes your current relationship? So we've got to do some deeper trauma work around trust. So yeah, trust it's kind of ambiguous in a way. It's different for everybody, but I think if you take the approach of, I'm just going to look at the layers of it. I'm going to approach it with building trust in this area and in this area. Again, if we do agreements and we put these agreements in place and my partner honors those agreements, then I know they're honoring their word. They're showing up. So again, I know I can trust them in that. But again, it takes time. I've got to see it repetitively, consistently over time. So I don't know if
Well,
that answered your
yeah, no,
question
it
or not.
helps a lot. And I was thinking, and I even wrote action, because like everything you've described is, action. It's not, I'm telling you, I'm trustworthy. You should believe me now. It's always every single layer of this has been, about action. So
Mhm.
on 6, when you said the environmental of proactive transparency, and you talked about the addict, I've had some partners who have, like the addicts are going like, let's be transparent, like, so with both. And I've had partners go, no, I'm not going to do that. So any thoughts on, if you're working on building trust, and I don't know, I'm just asking, like, what are your thoughts on, is it transparency across for both partners? I mean, or is that negotiated as part of the, of the plan for the two of you?
Well, I think it can be both. So I think it can be both. I do tell you that at some point we have to get to where what goes around comes around. What I ask of you, right? Then you can ask of me. That's part of rebuilding trust. So at some point, yes, we have to get there. I know that there's resistance at times from the betrayed partner. And I think it's because I just want to see you take the first step. I want to see you prove to me that you're willing, right, to, put your location on your
Mhm,
phone so I can see where you're at,
mhm,
right? And I can see that you've got a willingness to let me look at your phone
mhm,
or whatever it is. The proactive transparency piece is that we both agree to just automatically, you're welcome to look at my phone. Here's my passwords, right? I don't have to ask for it. You're just going to provide it and do it, right? Or if a question comes up, I just give you the information. And so I do know that in our hurt as betrayed partners, as we're trying to heal the betrayal, that oftentimes we do want to withhold. So I want you to know that's normal in the early stages. But as you're rebuilding trust and as your addict partner becomes safer, then there should be this shift where we're both willing to do the same thing. But I think at all times, I think a non-negotiable for me is that both people have to show up honestly and authentically. I think that is a non-negotiable that both need to do in that. As far as the transparency piece goes, that's really important.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll hear, I didn't act out, I didn't do any of those. Why should I have to? And so, I absolutely get it too,
Mhm,
but like you're saying, this is like higher order. We're working on building trust. What is
mhm,
that going to look like? So on number 8, I was thinking, set a time to talk. And I think having the container, but also having the time limit,
mhm,
of like, because I mean, I hear people that, are going at this for hours. So having, we're going to talk about this for, 15, 20 minutes and, and time, and we can come back and talk about it again, but having it be, we're going to constantly hash out these things and, drag on for hours. It's wearing, and nobody shows up in their best if they're just, emotionally worn out, so making sure that those
yeah.
limits are also in place.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
great boundary. I love the container idea of a certain amount of time, right? Set a timer. And then just know that, hey, if we don't get it all in, we're going to come back in
mhm,
24 hours and do the same thing. I think it does a couple of things. First of all, it reduces the resistance of the addict partner to show up and have a hard conversation, because I would hate to go into a conversation that lasts for 2 hours and a conversation that starts at 10 o'clock at night, knowing I've got to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning to go to work. So again, a container can be the space, the time, the
mhm,
amount of time,
mhm.
right, that we actually do it. But I don't think we should ever tell somebody, no, we're not going to talk about it. But it's okay to say, I'd be happy to talk about it, right? I want to put a container around it. Let's do it for 15 minutes. If we need to, we can add 10 more minutes or we can come back around. But going on and on and on and talking about the same thing and beating a dead horse, I hear clients say that, it's not going to help with connection. And remember, the goal is we're reestablishing healthy connection by rebuilding the trust.
And I think you can get a pretty good indication, after a period of time that, okay, we need to pause. We're going to go journal. We're going to get input from whatever, and then we can navigate this ourselves. Or this is one that we really need our professional help with, to, sort through it. I mean, so that it takes it away from us getting
Mhm,
into the fighting. Even if we're fair fighting, we're still fighting about something, which, if
mhm,
there's a better way to do it, perhaps. So
mhm,
great stuff. And I really, the don't gossip and trash talk. I mean, that ends up being like, yeah, I want to blame my, and both sides. I want to blame my addict, because look, all of this, and he's so horrible. But it's also the addict going like, well, she did this, and she's a, and it doesn't serve anybody. It's like we aren't taking accountability for, here's where we're at, and we're looking to build trust. So if I'm constantly shaming or putting somebody down, either side of the coin, then, that is, why would I want to be in a relationship with somebody who's doing that, to me? So it's hurtful. So,
mhm, mhm.
okay. So we have, there's more, but we have a question. So I have been sober from porn for over 3 years, but the pain was too much that my wife needed a divorce, which occurred last year. I didn't want the divorce, but I had to honor her wishes. We have 4 kids together and have been co-parenting. Last week, she told me that it kills her that we are not together, and I told her I feel the same way. She started to wear our wedding ring again on the other hand and told me that she is wearing it because she likes it. After she shared this with me, she pulled back the communication with me. I wanted to ask, is this normal behavior after divorce? I also wanted to ask if I have the right to share with her how I feel and how I want to make things work with her. And if I was to do so, could you give some suggestions on how to bring this up in a collaborative way with her and not overbearing? Great questions. Thanks for asking
Yeah.
this.
My brain's going all sorts of different
Yeah.
directions on this. Well, first of all, it would be so nice to have her input, right? It'd be kind of nice to know her side. So I'm going to make some assumptions, and it may be true, it may not. So I want to put that disclaimer out there to begin with. I understand how painful divorce is. And yes, it sounds like you guys are co-parenting and doing well to have this type of a conversation. So there was a lot of vulnerability in this on both sides. So oftentimes when we're vulnerable, it can create in us kind of, we can go into an attachment style. So my first thought is maybe that conversation could have been kind of being vulnerable a little bit. um, what's a good way to put it? It could cause your wife to maybe go into more of an avoidant attachment style, because sometimes we do that when we get vulnerable. I kind of pull away in order to protect myself, because maybe I'm afraid of further conflict. Maybe it feels overbearing. It's too much. Maybe I'm not sure what to do with the information. And oftentimes in divorce, we have ambivalence, meaning I know I need to be away from this person, but I love this person. So there could be that as well. So even in ambivalence, I might avoid it altogether. So if we were to give her some generous assumption, maybe she's got a lot of her own feelings and things that she's dealing with. And so, internally, she's got some things she's working through. I don't think there's anything wrong in communicating it the way you shared that you did. One thing I would add, though, is sometimes before I share hard things like that, I get permission from the person to share. So I might ask them, well, are you open to hearing how I'm feeling about this? Because in that moment, she may not have been ready to hear it. It may have been a bit overwhelming for her. Maybe putting it out there of, okay, let me know, because I do want to share with you, some similar thoughts. And so giving her some time to think about it and process it. For you, you may have a little more of an an anxious attachment style, excuse me. So you're now got this anxiety after sharing this of, oh my gosh, is she really, does she really care about me? Is she really going to come back around? And you're sitting in this anxiety. So for you, work on getting grounded, understanding that you put it out there, maybe give her some time. Again, you can maybe let her know that you're willing to have a discussion around this if she is, but you honor the fact that she needs to have her own boundaries and what's safe for her. She may not be in a position yet to collaborate. She might not, and then again she might. But I do know that as a betrayed partner, 3 years sobriety from porn, while it's good, right? I've also got to see a lot of other things. And maybe you're just starting to rebuild the trust with her in how you're co-parenting, and especially in how you honor her boundaries around this. So that might be kind of a telltale. So you can put it out there. Appreciate you sharing what you did. And, when you're ready to talk about it further, let me know, or let me know what you want to talk about it, because I appreciated the fact that you started to share this, and then just leave it with her would be some of the things to do. And again, sometimes when we have an anxious attachment style, we have a tendency to be overbearing, right? I'm moving towards you because I want you to connect with me. So, it's so important to me that you connect, that I come at you. And if somebody is avoidant, and we are as betrayed partners, we get avoidant. A lot of us, because we're afraid of getting hurt or getting hurt again. And so that's kind of a natural tendency. Again, a secure attachment isn't there between the two of you really, because of the pornography in the past and the betrayal. And so it's step by step. And because you're divorced, it's a different format. So I guess to circle back around, it's just manage your own anxiety around this, recognize what's coming up for you, work through it with your therapist if you're still going to therapy, make sure you're still maintaining all of your recovery work so that you can maintain your sobriety. If the opportunity comes up again, maybe just open the door and say, hey, I'm willing to talk about this more if you are. But if you're not in that position, I understand. And then continue showing up as a really good parent, and in, making sure that you're meeting the needs of your children and of your ex-wife in that area. And then maybe it'll create the safety for her where she'll then be willing to move towards you a little bit more. So that's kind of some of my ideas off the top of my head.
Yeah, I was thinking too, I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that with me.
Mhm.
I would welcome an opportunity to have more of a discussion if you're open to it, and leave it. And I would be super careful, like in the first paragraph, you said, I didn't want the divorce. Like, like I had this, I never wanted this, and so like making sure that there's no shifting or whatever, just showing up and being open to whatever the next phase is. But I love what Debbie was sharing too about, yeah, you're doing a good job co-parenting, you're working on your recovery. Those things will pay dividends regardless of what happens with the two of you. And if she's seeing that you're different, I mean, she was willing to share that she put her wedding ring on, other hand, but she still put it back on. So there could be some opportunities, but the more you're able to hold the space, and just be the safe place of like, I would welcome the opportunity to talk to you. And if things start getting a little much, just say, it feels like we're going a little, whatever, could we schedule a session with a qualified therapist to help us navigate this? I mean, think ahead of steps that could, be implemented. You're navigating the parenting, you're working on your recovery. This is a little more quicksandy. So making sure there's no word quicksandy, but making sure that you've got a plan for, I hear what you're saying. I would love to talk about this. This feels bigger than something that we probably, could navigate ourselves. Are you open to, talking with a qualified professional? I'll make the appointment, whatever, the more you're able to show up, with your thinking part of your brain, I think the more you're holding space, for that kind of a conversation. But you said, do I have the right? And I want to, I'm like, I think if your goal is hopeful, then looking at it as a right, but just say, there's an opportunity. And I think just honoring that she shared something really kind of big with you, and and honoring that, and that you're open to it. It feels more invitational than, well, I'm going to tell you how I feel. And I never wanted to, I mean, I'm not saying you would do that, but anyway,
Yeah.
that was my
And
thought.
she could have shared that as part of her grieving too,
Yeah.
right? That it kills me that, we're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
together. So she could be expressing some grief as well, as opposed to a desire to get back together. So, without
Fair
having
point.
further conversation, you really don't know. But you're right. I think you have to honor where she's at. And for you, because you didn't want the divorce, you have to also get to a place, regardless of there's anything that comes around in this relationship, you've got to get to a place of acceptance, right? And surrender that it is what it is, and that you're going to continue moving forward in your own recovery and showing up as a great parent and working with her. But yeah, you're right. It is a very kind of a quicksandy situation.
Mm-hmm.
So just continue focusing on yourself and continue working on recovery.
And be the dad those kiddos need. That's, I mean, I love that you're able, like, you clearly are showing up, for the kiddos, and that's, that's money. That's good. So,
Mhm.
okay. Well, another week. So Matt will be here next week, and then, Debbie will be back the first and third week of April already. Can you believe it? So I know it's kind of crazy. So we're grateful for all of you. The webinar will be posted on our website. I don't know about today, but by Monday. So check out that and many others as well. So thank you so much. Thanks for all
Thank you.
the support on the group too. Bye.
Bye.